Hello, Career Strategy Club members. So, in today's segment of the Know Yourself stage, I want to introduce you to the concept of your early career influences. Now, this is a small part of knowing yourself. It's a small piece in the beautiful mosaic of who you are, what your career identity is, and all of the things that make up the colorful person that you are. And the reason why this is important is it helps us connect to that element of our story, and it helps us understand and almost unearth, for want of a better word, the reasons why we do certain things, the reasons why we hold certain beliefs about our work, our career, our potential. And sometimes it's a window into what might mean or what might lead to some of the things that could be holding us back within our career. And what I mean by that is that we've all entered the working world. We've all moved and progressed into adulthood, and we're given the message: work hard, get a good qualification, get a good job, and climb the ladder of success. Now, as you know, I fundamentally believe that that is defaulted. There is no ladder of success to climb, but rather a network and web of further understanding ourselves, defining what success is for us uniquely, and then moving out into the world to find that within our work. So the hard work message of working hard at your job should actually be inverted to working hard on ourselves. And that's why you're here as Career Strategy Club members. So here is why early career influences is important. Because as we move into that world of work, and if you think back to the first time that you got one of those proper jobs, not a kind of part-time job, but a proper job, a job that had a salary and a pay slip and medical aid, and you had to pay tax, and you were now in the working world, much of what you brought into that space and place would have come from your early career influences. It's the nature nurture debate. That's who we were formed, who we became in our later childhood years to then prepare us for the world of work. And I've worked with so many people who will say to me, many of my clients find themselves in positions that they never chose to be in, and they're wanting to strategize themselves out of that. And many of the people that I've worked with, when I say to them, why did you become an accountant? Why did you become a doctor? Why did you study the qualification that you did? Why are you in the field that you're in? So much of those early career influences are either random, or they just the thing that everyone was doing at the time, or it was following the mainstream. I needed to go and study and do my articles. But what interests me the most is not so much about where the early career influence came from and what the effect was, but it was that my client at the time had no connection to that early career influence, or rather, they didn't see how that connection was powering them now in their career. Does that make sense? And I mean, of course, why would it? Very rarely do you find yourself, if you're in the mid stage of your career or potentially even moving through the ranks into, senior executive suite and nearing the end of retirement, very rarely would you find somebody who will say to you, tell me about your first job, or unpack within the details of that first job, why did you get into what you're doing, and tell us about it. So, I mean, there's that beautiful question, tell me about yourself, that interviewers sometimes start with. But my point is, how many of us have reflected on this? And this is your quest today in the Know Yourself stage segment of this week's exercise for you, is to reflect on your early career influences. Now, what I mean by an early career influence is anybody in the adult world who mirrored world of work, working career, and work. I mean, it might have been a parent, it might have been somebody in your family, somebody in your community. It might have even been somebody that taught you at school. I remember having an English teacher who absolutely hated being a teacher. She absolutely hated being an English teacher. She actually was a frustrated author, and she used to sit at the front of the class reading us excerpts from her book, not the curriculum that we needed, that we were going to be writing exams on, but her book. And subsequently, she didn't last in teaching very long. So that was an interesting early career influence. We all used to talk about her at break time, going, we felt sorry for her. We felt sorry that she wasn't able to get her book published, but we found her a fascinating person because she was clearly so frustrated and irritated with being a teacher. And we actually would laugh at the way that she would knock the school and knock the headmistress and the headmaster and everything about it. So that was an interesting early career influence because it struck me that sometimes the thing that you want to do doesn't appear or is out of your hands. And in this case, that created a huge impact on me because I never wanted to be an adult who was so regretful of not being able to do the thing that they wanted to do. Interesting story for the early, interesting story for the career strategist as an early career influencer. Now, like many of my exercises, there is no right or wrong here. I'm not here to say to you that you need to sit down and write down all of the adults in your world and what they mirrored for you. Not at all. I'd like this to be an organic exercise. I'd like to invite you to pursue this in a fairly organic way and really just set the intention and clear some space in your time and diary to just kind of daydream. And there's no better way of describing it. I just want you to kind of reflect and almost daydream in the past of who are some of the adults that came into your world, and it might have been when you were very young. Maybe you have an early memory of, being 6 or 7 and seeing somebody come in from the world of work and adulthood out there, and that impacted you. Maybe you were a little bit later on, maybe it was a bit later on, as you grew up, sort of middle school age, or maybe it was getting closer to university where suddenly conversations about what you wanted to become started to become was started to be more obvious with family members at family gatherings saying, what are you going to study and what are you going to do with your life? I certainly know that I had a whole host of those, and every time somebody asked me, what are you going to do, what are you going to study, I would simply draw a blank and go, I don't know. And that in itself was very interesting. So just set the intention. Spend create some space and time in your day and in this week to just reflect on that. Maybe you could have a conversation with somebody that connects you to that time, a sibling or a parent, if you're lucky enough to be able to speak with your parents in terms of contact and age and stage. Maybe you could speak with somebody that you studied with, an old friend from school or tertiary education. But reflect on this and take a piece of paper in this reflection and just write down the notes. Reflect on this question. As a child, what were my first impressions of the world of work? Now, those impressions might have come to you from movies, from watching TV, from listening to the radio, from an advert on TV. Goodness knows the marketers were very effective in creating a certain type of something that we need to aspire to. Um, so those early influences might not necessarily have been in terms of the adults around you. And sometimes this exercise does bring up some of the kind of bad and sad that you might want to move away from. I know I've worked with many clients who've said to me that their immediate parents mirrored to them everything they didn't want to do in work. Their father would come home from work exhausted, frustrated, and in a terrible mood from the horrible day that he'd had. And the children would sort of sit around the table or observe this and think, I don't ever want to go to that kind of work because he always hates it and he comes home so unhappy. Alternatively, some other of my clients have had parents who've influenced them and mirrored them in a far better way, in a far positive way. It's important to track these early career influences. what did they mean to us? What did they say? And you may never in your working world, in your career, had the opportunity to think of this. And this is the gift of what this exercise gives you. The gift of what this exercise gives you is the opportunity of deep reflection and just observance. What were some of my early career influences? So the way that I've worked with this with some of my clients is I've encouraged them to daydream, reflect, think, and then just jot down some names, names of adults, names of people, names of situation, or some emotions. Adults looked like they really hated work and they couldn't wait until the weekend. Adults looked like they enjoyed work. Adults looked like they were never paid enough. Adults looked like they were unhappy with who they worked with. I had a one, and I'm going to tell you some examples, some situational examples of some clients of mine. And I had an amazing client whose parents owned a corner store. And on the weekend, well, after school, during the week, and on the weekends, she would go and help her parents in the corner store, whether it was putting prices on goods that they were selling or unpacking boxes or sometimes even serving customers and clients. And what she remembered so vividly from this corner store that her parents owned and they both worked in was one, hard work was part of the equation. Like they never had a day off except for Sunday. And even on Sunday, they were doing something that was aligned to the shop. The dad was doing recons of sales. Her mother was repackaging things. They were just, the shop was everything. It was their entire family identity. So hard work was part of the equation, but they did it together. They worked together, and through this work, they developed a community. They had regulars who would come in to their corner stores. They had neighbors, they had friends, and they knew what these people wanted, and they were able to put things on the shelves that spoke directly to their customers. So although it was hard work, it was associated with this wonderful sense of warmth and community and people around. And that was something that she carried with her wherever she went, unbeknown to her at the time, though, because when she came to me, she found herself in a place of success, external success in her career, but deep dissatisfaction because she had no sense of community. She had no support. And she always longed for this atmosphere of the corner store. She always longed for the sense of community. She had created it in many ways throughout her career as she had grown by being the leader and the manager that created this sense of family within work. But the reality is the job that you have is not your family. But if you own a family run business and a corner store, that's very different. But that had impacted her and influenced what she expected and wanted from her corporate career. And that was why she felt such deep dissatisfaction and disappointment. Another lovely example is I had a client whose father was an attorney and had gone through a bit of financial difficulty with his practice, so chose to not rent an office for his firm, but to create an office at home. So the cars were parked on the road, and the double garage suddenly converted into a law firm, and a paralegal and an assistant would come to the home, which was once the garage, but was now this attorney's office. And there was obviously an interleading door that separated the work space from the home space. And they then created a separate entrance and everything. So it was quite exciting. And my client and her siblings and her mother were very excited about the fact that they now had their partner, their husband, and their father close to home. What they didn't understand or see at the time and realize was that in the time that he would commute from his office to home, he would let go and unbundle the day. But now that there was no commute, but simply an interleading door from where the office was to where the living room was, there was no transition for him. So he would come in from the office into the family home and bring all the stress and the worries and the concerns of this demanding and stressful legal practice directly into the home environment. And my client at the time, I think she said she was around 12 or 13, and she was the eldest sibling. She had spent time at her father's legal office. She knew that he was in law, and she was so proud of him and so proud of the work that he did. And suddenly that changed because not her pride for her father didn't change, but it converted into concern because she saw this very concerned, stressed, and hugely distracted father now spend time with the family. And of course, what happened was, even though he was working from home, they saw even less of him because he was always behind this interleading door and always in his office. So what she then started to feel, the mirroring, the modeling and the mirroring and the early career influence for her was, don't get staff because they're a hassle. Don't have clients because they're a hassle. Don't work for yourself because you'll have financial issues and problems. Always make sure that you are an employee. Do not be an entrepreneur. Do not start your own practice. None of that. She just, computated that everything that her father was dealing and battling with was because he ran his own business. And that, of course, isn't the truth. That was potentially a part of what his truth was, but there wasn't really conversation. There wasn't really explanation. And her father continues to be an attorney and a practicing attorney now, even though he's long past retired age, because he's developed and had developed an amazing community and niche, practiced within a niche space of law. But that was something that really shaped my client, who had steered clear of doing anything entrepreneurial. Although fundamentally, what she was most excited about was creating a new way of work in the world. And she just couldn't find satisfaction in any corporate job to be able to support her big entrepreneurial drive, which she also had from her father, but she didn't connect that early career influence with why she was feeling a huge amount of frustration. So sometimes there can be a direct link when we reflect on our early career influences. Sometimes there can be a very thin, shadowy link, but there always is a link. And my quest for you right now, today, in this first exercise, is simply to reflect on, what were those early career influences? What did they tell you about the world of work? What were the adults in your world, whether they were family, community, or people that you were getting from, potentially TV or radio or reading books? What were adults in your world at the time of you being a young child? What were they projecting onto you? What were you learning? What were the emotions that they were experiencing? I want you to have a think about that. I want you to daydream, spend some time, and write down the emotions. You might be able to get quite granular and detailed and write down the actual experience that they had. Or at this point, it's just about, what were the emotions that you were feeling that those early career influences were programming in you. And I will see you in a moment for the next exercise, but write this down.